In last week's parsha, the Torah tells us, "Vayarom kivoshish Moshe." The people had seen that Moshe was delayed. So the Midrash says, Moshe shows, when the sixth hour came, Niskansu Arboim Elif Sha'olom Yisrael, 40,000 of the rabble who had left Egypt with the Jews, Ushnei Chartum Mitzrayim Yimoyim, and two of the sorcerers of Egypt, who were the leading sorcerers of Egypt, together with these 40,000 Egyptians, came to Aaron, Ushmosam Eunice V'Umbris. These two sources, one's name was Eunice, Shayosim Fnei Parakolosam Kshofim, and they were the main sorcerers in Egypt. The ones who had mimicked what Aaron had done with the staff, all that, these were these two sorcerers who were sent together with the Jews when they left Egypt. And these 40,000 plus these two sorcerers, they gathered around Aaron and they said, Shemoshe Shuv Eni Yored Kfar. They said, Moshe is not coming back. Omru Lahem, Aaron the Chur. So Aaron the Chur was still alive. They said to him, Achshav Yored Minor, he's coming soon. They paid no attention to Aaron the Chur. Then he quotes the Midrash, what Rashi cites. The Herolem Dubus Moshe Mitosel Minahor. Satan came and showed him an image of Moshe's remains on top of the mountain. Immediately Chur stood up and he reprimanded them. He reprimanded these 40,000 Egyptians and the two sorcerers. The moment he reprimanded them, they rose and they killed him. They killed Chur. This is when Chur was killed. Aaron was concerned because, as the Gemara tells us, that he was concerned they would kill him, and if they kill him, it's not because he would have been killed, but because if they kill him, the Jews will never be forgiven. Because since he was a Kohen and Navi, and if a Kohen and Navi is killed, there's no atonement. They said, make for us a god. That's what they demanded of Aaron. Aaron. So Aaron says to them, listen to this. He says, take the earrings, the gold earrings that are in the ears of your wives, and bring them to me. This is what we need to make this golden calf. Aaron said something specifically because he knew they refuse. He knew the women would not give their jewelry. They would not give their jewelry. Why? Because the women had seen all the powerful miracles in Egypt, on the sea, and at Sinai. Therefore, he's sending them to the women. Because, the women are not giving up their jewelry. Why? They went to the women. And they demanded the jewelry from the wives. And the women said, this is very important. God forbid we should reject Hashem by doing idolatry. After Hashem had done for us all these miracles and these wonders, we're going to now do idolatry. How do we turn our backs on God to go after idolatry? So the women refused to give their jewelry. Why? Because the women said, should we reject God after all that he did for us? We're going to go now after false gods. Since they saw the women would not give their jewelry, Machsiv, Vayishpor Kol Omes Nizmei Hazov, Asher name. They themselves took out off their own jewelry. Asher Bosnei Nishem Lo Nemer. It doesn't say the earrings of the women. El Asher Bosnei, the men. So the men participated in the Egel, the women did not participate. But why did the women not participate? We find that the Schus Noshim Sidkonis Nigla was in Mitzrayim, not too far from Pesach. We could talk about this at the Seder. In the merit of the righteous woman who left Egypt. What was the story? We find by the Mishkan that the kior, the laver, was made of what? Was made of copper. Initially, the material that was needed for the Mishkan was Zov, Kesef, Nechoshes, gold, silver, and copper. We find that the Mizbach HaOlah, the outer Mizbeach, was made of copper. It was called Mizbach HaOlah. It was called the burnt offering. That's what it was called, the Mizbeach, the altar. But the kiyah was not made of the copper which they donated. The kiyah was made from the Maris Hatzovos. The mirrors the women used to beautify themselves, that was the copper used to make the kiyah. And when they brought it to Moshe Rabbeinu says, the Kohen has to ritualize his hands and feet every day before he does the avodah. If he doesn't, the avodah is not valid. The service is not valid. I should take the copper, which is the paraphernalia of the Satan, because the woman beautifies herself. She seduces the man. I should use that for the kiyah. So Hashem says that those mirrors to me are more precious than everything that was given for the Mishkan. Why? Because when the Jews were in Egypt and they were in this very serious level of bondage, the men had no interest in procreating. No interest. They felt that we're here forever. There's no point in having children. And they weren't interested in procreating. The women themselves went out to the fields and they never lost faith that ultimately the Gula will come. And they took these mirrors, the wives out to the field where they would bring hot water and food for their husbands. And they would actually seduce their husbands by looking at these mirrors together with them. And they would say, who's more attractive, me or you? And ultimately, they would cohabit out in the fields. And this is how the children came about. So why were the children? There were children only because of these mirrors. These mirrors were the medium through which the men engaged with their women. Now, for us to leave Egypt, what was the critical mass number we needed? We needed 600,000 men above the age of 20. If we wouldn't have had that number, we wouldn't have left Egypt. So why were there those numbers? Because the women had taken these mirrors and seduced their husbands to engage with them. That's why they were these children. And that's why they're called Maros Hatzovos. They are the mirrors which brought about the Tzvos Hashem. The legions of Jews left Egypt were brought about through these mirrors. Therefore, Hashem says, these mirrors are Chavivin Olim Bikula. They're more beloved to me than everything that was given for the Mishkan. Therefore, you make the kiyar, the laver out of that, and therefore, if there's ever a question where a woman had, God forbid, committed adultery, the water will be taken from that laver, from the kiyar, made of that copper, and my name will be obliterated into that water, and she'll be given that water to drink, and she'll be adjured by the Kohen, and that will determine her innocence or not. And I will allow my name to be obliterated in that water. So I explained in the past, obliterating Hashem's name is normally a Torah violation. But for the sake of restoring the relationship between husband and wife, if she did not commit adultery, I will allow my name to be obliterated. So the question is why? Because of the legions. Because what these mirrors represent. Now, why is there a Yud Kei Vav Kei in the world? Why is there a presence of God in this world? Oh, because it's a Jewish people. If there wouldn't have been a Sinai, there wouldn't have been a Kabbalah Torah, there would be no Jewish people, the world would have no value. The world would have reverted back to pre-existence. So only because of the women that they brought about the Tzvay Hashem, they brought about the number of 600,000 men above the age of 20, was there a Kabbalah Torah. Therefore, Hashem says, because of these mirrors, there is a Yud Kei Vav Kei. Otherwise, there'd be no Yud Kei Vav Kei. Therefore, for the sake of restoring the relationship with the wife, to prove her innocence, I will allow my name to be obliterated. But that's the Noshim Sitkonis, Nigulav Sin B'Mitzrayim. This is how we explained it in the past. So you would say the reason why the women did not participate or didn't want anything to do with the gold gift for the same reason, that a level of clarity which the men did not have. The Gemara tells us in Nida that a girl becomes an adult a year before a male. A girl is 12 years old, a boy is 13 years old. Why? Why does a girl become an adult, reach adulthood a year before? So the Gemara says, we find that when Hashem created Chava, the Eza Kenegdo, for Adam, the Torah says, Vayiven es hatzela. The word Vayiven, he built the side. He took an appendage from her, and he built the woman. So the Gemara says, Vayiven bino yiser nidma isha. A woman has an additional level of understanding which a man does not have. What they call like women's intuition. A woman naturally comes upon things, a man does not have that. But because the woman has bina yisera, she has this additional level of understanding, therefore she matures a year before a man. That's why a girl is an adult is considered competent a year before a male. This is the Gemara. So you'd say, why did the women have this level of clarity? That's due to the bina yisera. Therefore, they understood it. Therefore, they didn't despair. But we see over here by the Chet Egel, it's unrelated to that. It's not that quality of Noshim Tzidkonius. It's another quality. We find in the 40th year of the desert, the Jews were eating man for 40 years. What happens all of a sudden? We're about to go into Eretz Yisrael, and the Jews come up with a claim to Moshe Rabbeinu that we believe if we continue eating the man, we're going to die. Why? Because for 40 years we ingested all this man, and it goes into our systems. We never expelled it from our systems. You know what's going to happen? Ultimately, it's going to expand, and our intestines are going to burst. Therefore, we're not interested in this man any longer. Hashem sends vipers, and the Jews are bitten, and Moshe makes a copper snake. That's the story. But what did they say? So what did Hashem say? Kefuye tova b'nei kefuye tova. You're ingrates who descend from an ingrate. You're ingrates here. I give you something with such value that you shouldn't have to leave the camp to do your bodily functions and to be totally inconvenienced. And you're saying you're going to die from this, and you descend from a kofui tova. Who's the original kofui tova? The ingrate Adam. After Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, Hashem says, what happened? He says, Isha shenosati modi. It's the wife that you gave me. Hashem, it's your fault. It's only because you gave me a wife, that's why I failed. That was the first statement of Kfuyei Tova. Hashem says you're an ingrate. Rather than recognizing that it's your failing, you want to pin the blame on me, you're an ingrate. So that defect in the human being of Kfuyei Tova existed in Adam. We as human beings, being his descendants, we inherited that trait, that defective gene. Therefore, the Jews in the 40th year, they came with the claim of Lechem HaKloke, we're going to die of this. So Hashem says, Kfuyei Tova b'nei Kfuyei Tova. The women, what did they say? Why aren't they giving their jewelry? They said, we're going to be Kofar B'kei Yisrael. We're going to deny the God of Israel after he did the Nisim in Egypt, the Yam at Sinai. How can we do such a thing? So what were they saying? It's doing that is the ultimate level of being an ingrate. There's no way we're doing that. Therefore, we're not giving out our jewelry. So we see that a woman has a capacity to be more appreciative than a man. A man doesn't have that capacity to be appreciative. A woman does. And because of that, a woman doesn't toot her own horn and beat her own drum and like a man beats to his drum. Because a man has that lack of clarity because he has this defect called Kofui Tova. We're more vulnerable to being an ingrate than a woman. and therefore the women would not give their jewelry for that reason. So with this, I explained something. It's the first time I said it yesterday, that we find that Gemara tells us, based on the pasuk, until in Barasi Yitzhara Barasi Torah Tavli, the only antidote to the evil inclination is the study of Torah. Otherwise, we couldn't survive the evil inclination, all its machinations, to get clarity. That's Ner Mitzvah Torah Or. The ultimate illumination is the Torah. So the question is, so what about a woman? A woman has no obligation to study Torah. So if that's the case, how does she contend with the Yitzhara, with evil inclination? Right? Question is asked. So the Vilna Gaon explains that a woman, although she doesn't have the study of Torah, the way she contends with it is through tznius, through modesty. As David Melch says in Tilim, that the ultimate kavod of a woman, of the bas melech, is pnima, that she's modest. A modesty, that's what protects from the Yitzhara. So I was thinking, exactly based on this midrash, what's a man we see is what is an heir of this gene, much more severe than a woman, because we're kafli toivo. Therefore, we don't have the appreciation that a woman has. Therefore, the evil inclination plays on us. Therefore, we need, despite the vulnerability, because of vulnerability, therefore we need the Torah to give us that level of clarity to contend with this. A woman who has the clarity naturally because she's a makid tova, because she has an appreciation. So therefore, she's not going to be distracted and taken on this path, which is unacceptable. And that's the reason why the women would not give their what? Would not give their jewelry for the make of the egel. There's a Yerushalmi, which Rashi Psachim cites, there's a minog that women don't sew on Rosh Chodesh. I don't know if you ever heard the minog. Women do not sew Rosh Chodesh. It's a minog. Why? So it says Moshe Rabbeinu gave him a Yom Tov as a gift. Women have responsibilities. They have to sew. Because the women did not give their gold for the golden calf. Moshe Rabbeinu gave them a gift that on Rosh Chodesh, they're free of that level of obligation. The sewing. They don't sew. Exactly because the women would not give their jewelry for the. But why did they give it? Okay, so the ask question, why? So now we have, why didn't they give it? The answer is because they're makatova. Because the woman has that hakor satov. She has that greater capacity to recognize what Hashem does and provides for her. Therefore, there's no way she's taking that she's going in that direction. A man does not. Therefore, the man needs the Torah to be the antidote for the Yitzhara, not to hoodwink him as he usually does. I want to say. Say what you were just going to say.
Could we relate to what the Rav was describing as the chayt of Chava enticing Adam to eat from the Eitz Hadas?
So this was a correction on that. So I was thinking this. If not for the Chet Egel, we did revert back to pre-sin of Adam. It's only because Chet Egel we went post-sin. If Chava wouldn't have offered the fruit of the tree of knowledge to Adam, the world would have reached this level of perfection at that moment. All these thousands of years that we've been contending with the Yetzer Hara was only because of that event which happened in the Gan Eden, and Adam was driven out of the Gan Eden. If not for that, so if Chava wouldn't have offered the fruit, Adam would have met his challenge, he wouldn't have eaten it, and the world would have come to its level of perfection. At this moment at Sinai, that 40-day period, we reverted back to pre-sin. Idolatry brought us post-sin. Like you're saying, Chava, she participated in bringing the world to sin, which as a result of that, the world did not reach its level of shleimus, of perfection. Now, Chava has the clarity. Originally, Chava would have had the clarity. Adam misled her by taking something which was offense and telling it's the word of Hashem. that you should not eat of the tree of knowledge. That's why she made that mistake. She failed. Here, she has the clarity. Now there's no one here to hoodwink her. So because she has the capacity of Hakor Satov, therefore, she wants to stay pre-sin, not post-sin. And that's what she said. After all Hashem did for us, we see clearly what it is. We can't behave this way. The man said, no, we'll go on there. But of course, the men did not initiate this. This was initiated by the Erev Rav, by the rabbi. As it said, 40,000 of them, plus the two most advanced level of sorcerers, left Egypt with this 40,000. So the reason why he said earrings, because the earrings is the Koach HaShmiyah, internalization, like we find it the Eved Ivri, we put the hole through his ear. I told you, in Sinai you heard you should not steal. Or in Sinai you heard that you're the subjects of Hashem. How do you sell yourself to be a subject of a subject, to remain that? Therefore, there's a defective component to you that you can't internalize that reality. The woman does not have that defective component. And therefore, she's not giving her earring for that. She's not giving it. Now, a woman cannot sell herself into slavery. The only person to be sold or be sold, selling himself into slavery for stealing is only a man, not a woman. A woman can be sold as a maidservant by a father when she's a minor. The moment she reaches adulthood, she's freed. She's emancipated. The master must let her go if he doesn't marry her before. It's either marriage or emancipation. But a woman does not stay, cannot, if she steals or chooses to sell herself, she's not permitted. It doesn't exist. The question is why? What's the reason? Because again, a man has a defective component within him. He's not able to internalize what was said at Sinai. So for him, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Would he say, "Oh, Adoni," as Bonai, whatever? A woman's not going to say that. Because a woman has that clarity, because in Hakor Satov, as the woman understood that there's no way after what we saw and experienced, are we going to turn our backs on God? The same idea. If Hashem took us to be, we're his subject, are we going to sell ourselves to a mortal subject, to a mortal master? Under no circumstance. Therefore, the laws of Eved or Shivcha has no relevance to a Jewish woman. You have a Shivcha Cananis. You have a maidservant who's a non-Jew, who goes into this interim semi-status. But a Jewish woman can never be that. Because a woman has that understanding, therefore she has no relevance to that whatsoever. That's what it's thinking. Vayakol Moshe es kol hadas b'nei Yisrael v'yom aleim. Moshe gathered all the congregation of Israel, and he said to them, Eila dvorim asher tziva Hashem lasos oso. These are the things that Hashem has commanded that you should do. So Rashi himself explains, L'mochras Yom Kippurim, the day after Yom Kippur, Moshe came down with the second set of tablets on Yom Kippur, which is the day of forgiveness. And because we were forgiven when we received the second set of tablets, the 10th of Tishrei was designated for all time. This is the day of forgiveness. It's the expression they assembled. Now the Gemara tells us in Shabbos, how many categories of creative activity do we have on Shabbos? We have Lamates Malachos, 39. We have primary halachos, then we have what we call toldos. We have subcategories of each classification. You have the Av and you have the Tolda. Okay. For instance, you have Zorea Notea. Planting is one of the 39 activities not permitted to do. Zorea is when you take a seed and put it in the ground. Notea, in English, it's the same word, planting. You plant the seed, you plant a sapling. But in Hebrew, one is called Zorea, when you put the seed in the ground. Notea is when you take the sapling and put it in the ground. But it's the same malacha. It's the exact same thing. We have a malacha, you're not permitted to cook on Shabbos. Mevashel. What about ofer, baking? It's the same malacha. Except one is with liquid, cooking is with liquid, baking is dry. There's no liquid involved to bring it to a level of edibility. Cooking is when you take something raw and you put it in some liquid, and the liquid being absorbed into the food item, entering, exiting, that allows the food to become edible. Baking, it just bakes. There's no liquid going in, it's drying. That's what baking is, but it's the same malacha. Has many ramifications. What's a toldo? What about if you have a plant and you water a plant on Shabbos? Watering a plant is called tolda. That's a derivative. That since the effect of watering enhances the growth or allows it to grow, it has a semblance of putting the seed in the ground. Because when you put the seed in the ground, by putting it in the ground, which is a location which allows the seed to begin ultimately germinating. So similarly, the water, it says pruning a tree. It's called zomer. Zomer is what? Is notea. Because when you prune a tree, it enhances the growth of the tree. These are toldos. Those are derivatives, those are subcategories of the primary malacha. Just to give you a little background. Now, we know the 39. Where did we come up with number 39? Maybe Zorea, Notea, maybe it's two malachas. How do we know it's one malacha? And maybe Zomer, pruning a tree, maybe it's a separate malacha. But yet it's called a tolda. It's a derivative. It's a subcategory of that. Or many other things. The answer is because it's alluded to in this pasuk that there are only 39 categories of malacha. Why? It says Eileh. What's this Gemara in Shabbos? This is Rabbi Yochanan. What is the numerical value of Eileh? It's 36, right? Hadvorim. Dvorim is 2. That's 38. Ha. The things, that's the initial one. That's the basis for Lamates Melachos in the Torah. So Tosa says in Shabbos, if we wouldn't have this allusion to 39, you could have thousands of melachos, because you'd categorize, you'd count the subcategories or the derivatives or things that have a semblance of the malacha as independent melachos. Therefore, the Torah says it's all limited to 39. Then we figure out what are primary, and the other, we have subcategories, those are the toldos. Okay? So the first Baal Turim cites the Gemara in Shabbos. Doshim ikan l'shloshim teishim lochos l'Shabbos k'min eiler dvorim mash b'shnayim hey da dvorim l'rabos echari lamates. The word lassos, the vav is deleted, right? Lassos osam. So the Baal Turim says, how many days do we engage in creative activity? 6 days. So the lassos is 6. When Shabbos comes, you have to cease. That's what the vav is alluding to. So the lassos, there's one day you're not permitted to engage. So over here, the Balturim says from Vayakel until the pasuk goes far eish b'chol mashur sechem. You're not permitted to kindle fire in your communities. There are 39 words. You hear this? From the first word of the parsha until goes far eish b'chol mashur sechem, the 39 words. Chutz milas haShabbos. Hiskir lo savaru v'shitzor chavoras eish l'machsa mishkan. Okay. Sheshes is what? The gematria of Sheshes is Arboim Choser Achas. 40 minus 1 is Sheshes. Okay, we're going to stop here. We have to
Rabbi, it
halacha.
seems that